Hello, everybody. Welcome to Night Reads, where it is night and I reads. My name is Brian Basham. Tonight's featured reading is from Murder in Absentia by Assaph Mehr. It is an adult science fiction novel. You can find more information on my website at www.brian Basham BASHAM.com, and that would all be under the Night Reads link at the top. There, on this in this selection, there are a few breaks that have the three little stars going across. You know, if you've ever seen that in books, there's a few of those in this reading selection. I'm going to assume that those are there to denote a disco dance party, and I'm going to treat them accordingly. So if you see me start going, yeah, scene change, then that's what that's about. And I will probably be cutting that from the edited version, so if you don't get to see this version, then you're missing out. And you will never know the difference. Anyway, let's get started. Chapter 1. Walking through the dense wood, I could hardly see the ground, for the faint moonlight did not penetrate the canopy of trees, and a thick white mist was curling around my legs, obscuring roots. I tripped and fell, got up, walked on. Vague glimpses and rare breaks amidst the branches offered me faint stars that were not enough to show me direction. Before me, around me, behind me, between the trees, all I saw was the fog. I kept walking, avoiding branches and roots, drawn inexorably towards my unwanted destination, the clearing. I showed as I walked out from beneath the trees, taking careful steps across the moonlit grass. At the clearing's edges, out of the corner of my eye, I saw what I thought was moonlight reflecting in eyes. The sheen of purple-black fur. But whenever I turned, I saw only gray-white mist and leaves. I edged to the middle of the clearing. The grass looked like brittle shards of silver in this light. In front of me loomed a well. I knew that was where my destination lay, the reason for my being here. I walked over to it. I placed my hands on the stones of its sill and turned my head to look up to the stars. I stared at them, and they blinked back at me coldly. I steeled myself to face the well, face what was inside it. That was why I was drawn here, to make me confront the thing down in its depths. I didn't want to, but I had to. I circled the well, so that I would not obstruct the moonlight, let it shine on its contents. I turned my gaze down and saw the armless, legless body floating in the well, face down. As I was looking at it, it bobbed and flipped around, and I could see the bloated and decomposed flesh, the scars marring the marble breast, its face deformed, the stare in its vacant right eye, the maggots eating away the left eye socket and through the cheek. And even through all the ravages and the filtered moonlight, I recognized her. I am certain the neighbors heard my scream as I sat up in bed. "Dasha," I cried. "Dasha, you old crone. Where are you when I need you? No use." deaf as a dead donkey when she sleeps, that one. I should have sold her years ago. However, no one would pay me for that useless old bat. Besides, she was the last living reminder I had of my parents. I got up in search of water to wash my face. Not being one to insist on social graces, I stumbled naked out of my sleeping cubicle and into the peristyle garden. I shoved my head under the cool fountain waters. Head cleared of cobwebs, I looked up and saw the rampant fawn grinning madly at me as it peed fresh water down on me. That statue at the top of the fountain was the work of a nameless artist, and rightly so. The upper body of a man, the legs of a goat, a mad look in his eyes, set above a leering grin, the right hand holding high a lyre, the left clutching at a member that would make Priapus envious. My father's impeccably horrendous taste in interior decor. Day had dawned. Dasha must have gone down to the markets for fresh bread and produce for the day. I went to the kitchen, raided it for some old crusts, and went back to my study. I looked at my desk and saw the open scroll of Nicander, cataloging and establishing a taxonomy of venomous monsters. A plate with leftovers of last night's chicken and fish sauce on one side and an empty wine goblet to the other, holding it open. Those must have been responsible for my night terrors, and I was in no mood to pursue them further, even in daylight. I decided instead to immerse myself in the memoirs of Plautus. His life, according to him, was even more farcical than his plays. Nothing highbrow about him, all foreign kings and concubines, indigestion and inebriation. Change. Dasha ambled into my study, bringing me out of my reverie. A visitor, Domine, she announced with her croaky voice. Of the praying kind. Of the praying kind. It was mid-morning by then, the sounds of the city in full swing around me. Dasha must have returned from her shopping and busied herself with the sundries of household maintenance while I had been reading. Most people have a door slave, a large burly type to intimidate potential visitors and deter the less savory elements of society from making a forced entry. I had Dasha. This had proved sufficient on 3 counts. First, I had no money to pay for a proper door slave. Second, with Dasha giving her one-eye squinting stare, naught but the most stout of heart would do anything except mumble and move away. Third, in my line of business, a crone is akin to good credentials, even a fake crone. Well, show him into my study, and then come help me into my toga, I said. When I walked back into my study, dressed appropriately to do business, I saw before me a fidgety young man. He looked apprehensively over his shoulder as Dasha was eyeing him with a slight mad drool. Dasha, bring up some wine and cold water. I dismissed her. I walked around my desk and sat in my backless chair, indicating to my guests to do the same in the client's chair in front. My dominus would like to hire your services, he began as soon as he sat down. The matter is private and urgent, and my master will be willing to pay you for your time. If you would come with me, I will take you to him right now. I looked over, dressed in a plain tunic made of good fabric, with a circular embroidery outlining the fish and an amphora on the left side of his chest. Healthy looking, soft hands, a scribe or secretary, wearing his master's insignia. So what does one of our esteemed roans want from me? He didn't register any surprise, so my guess must have been correct. I've only been asked to fetch you, Felix the Fox. Dominus did not authorize me to discuss details. However, the matter is important. My master will pay well. He can afford to, I thought, being one of the 15 roans elected this year to administer agricia. Dasha appeared in the doorway, carrying a tray with a silver jug of wine and a jug of cold water. She set it on my desk, and I offered my visitor the refreshments. Well watered, if you please, he replied resignedly. There are some things we need to discuss before I will accept your master's summons. Let's start with your name and your master's name. My name is Typhius, and I served his most excellent Marcus Quinticus. I don't know how to pronounce this. Quintius Corpio Ronus Piscium. And what does the roan of fish need from me? Surely he has access to all the resources of the Collegium Mercatorum, and one would hazard to those of the other collegia as well. That, as I explained, you will have to hear from my master's lips alone. What can you tell me, then, to satisfy my curiosity, and to assure me that I will not be wasting my time? Not that I had better plans for the day, but I could smell good money coming my way. Really, the matter is of the utmost importance to my Dominus. It is personal and does not concern his position of roan of fish. It is also urgent. He looked like he hadn't gotten much sleep the night before. Please come, he pleaded. Very well. I will go with you if you agree to my terms. I quoted him, double my usual rate, and added plus expenses. He acknowledged it without a blink. Let's go, I said, finishing my wine and wishing I had tripled my rates. Sea change. Disco dancing. Okay. We took the alley from my house to the road of unsavory smells, or it is more commonly known, the street of cheesemakers. My house, you see, lies on the Meridionale, the southern of the two arms of Virgo that make the Bay of Graecia, not the more fashionable Septentrionale, the northern arm, or the ludicrously rich slopes of Virgo itself, but still high enough from the docks and meat markets on the bay shores to be considered decent. Typhus walked ahead in a brisk pace, taking me further down the hill and angling towards the forum at the head of the bay. He walked confidently through the warren of alleys that lead down to the water, rather than go to the long way by the Vicus Petrosa, the main road that runs along the ridge of the Meridionale behind my house. We reached the shores of the bay and walked along the embankment with the wharves and storehouses towards the Forum Agricium. So tell me, Typhoeus, what kind of man is your master? A good man, quicker of mind than of temper, and right now a very distraught man, one whom I would gladly see served well. And the place we are going to is Domus. Not the talkative type, or maybe just loyal, which is why he was entrusted with the errand of fetching me. When we reached the head of the bay with its official Navy wharves, instead of heading towards the Forum, we turned right and continued to walk next to the water, passing between the wharves and the Collegium Mercatorum. We were heading towards the there's that word again, I can't really pronounce it. Septentrionale. Septentrionale. Rather than up the slopes of Mons Virgo. Most Rhones, even the lesser Rhones like Corpio, would be rich enough to own houses on the high slopes above the Forum. Some, however, preferred not to remain too close to the colleagues, or to keep to their colleagues, or to keep close to the business districts, or even to remain in their quiet ancestral houses. We went past the Emporium Ionius and climbed up the Septentrionale, joining the Vicus Caprificus to walk along the ridge of the hill that runs throughout the northern arm of the bay. The neighborhood changed gradually as we ascended, from wharves and silos and porticos of merchants and artisans to mansions of increasing size. The further up we went, the longer the distances between side alleys and doorways, and the fewer the features on the walls facing the street. This being early in the month of Avrilis, right after the spring equinox, and the day still young, I did not mind the walk. It gave me both plenty of fresh air and a chance to think about what business might a roan have for such as me. I tried again. How's the roan's health these days? His Excellency is a man in his prime and in excellent health. And his business, I added, this past winter has been mild, no storms to speak of. His business is prosperous, as always. The new season cuttlefish are now in the market. The people are happy, and his year in public office is off to a good start. A personal matter, then. A most personal one indeed. His wife? My mistress has been dead these past 7 years, he said with a stony face. Please let us get to my master, and he will explain the matter to your satisfaction. I gave up and resolved to enjoy the walk and the view. Scene change. Okay. We reached Corpio's Domus. It was located past the crest of Septentrionale on the cliff's side, away from the noise and smells of the markets around the lower shores of the bay. On a clear day like today, from the houses at the very top of the hill, one can see the whole city, the bay with the port of Grecia and its wharves, surrounded by rising slopes of red tiles on the other side, and going up the mountain. To the north, one can see the wide blue sea. Almost as importantly, from up here, one cannot see the squalor and misery of lower Grecia, or smell the cramped humanity with its life of markets, cooking, and refuse that lie beyond the crest of the Meridionale away from the bay. Corpio's mansion presented an unassuming facade to the street, a black wall painted in muted russet colors, a large oaken door with brass knobs and lashes was set deep in the wall, flanked by tall cypresses on both sides. A tile painted with the family crest of fish and amphora was set into the wall next to the door. Typhoeus knocked politely, and a small slit opened and closed a second later. The heavy door swung inwards. "Please wait here," said Typhoeus, "as I go and announce you to my master." I remained as told in the vestibule. Through the open doorway I could see a large atrium flanked with columns, with corridors and doorways running further in. The natural light filtered through the open roof and shimmered on the shallow pool filled with goldfish and embedded with mosaics depicting sea life. The columns around were painted turquoise, and the reflected light dancing upon them gave a feeling of an underwater grotto. This must be his ancient family home, I decided, as the effect was too refined to be anything less. Typhoeus returned. "Follow me, please," he said, and led me through the house to his master's study, gestured me inside, and then followed me in and closed the door. Though I knew of him, as I followed the forum gossip and about all our elected rones, this was the first time I had encountered Corpio in person. It pays to keep abreast of the movers and shakers, though I find it best to stay out of their way or risk getting crushed in their politics. Corpio was in his early 50s, a large and healthy man, getting soft around the middle, long nose, high cheekbones, and bronzed skin of his face and arms showing signs of much wind and sunlight, as did his sun-bleached blonde hair. His eyes were bluish-green, now shot with red, as if he had been rubbing them. He must have spent much time in his youth on ships out at sea, but since gone soft from spending more of his days on land for his public career. "Come in and sit down, please." He indicated a chair in front of his desk, into which I lowered myself. "I have knowledge of your reputation, Felix, and more importantly, I have knowledge of your discreetness. Both are of the utmost importance to me at this time. Do we have an understanding?" I nodded my assent. It was my experience that when men who have risen high in society open like this, the details will come only on their terms. "This is a personal matter, one where I have need of your special skills. It does not concern the other rones, nor the Senate. Whatever you may find, you are to report to me and only me." I merely nodded again. "This matter concerns my youngest son. Say so." Queso? Say so. I'm going to pronounce it say so, because queso is cheese. There was a catch in his voice as he said his son's name. He stared at me and blinked several times. I remained silent, letting him collect himself. "My son is dead. He was found last night in most unusual circumstances, which I require you to investigate." My son, my youngest son, say so. He was not like his elder brother Marcus, never found his sea legs, and was never interested in our family's business and traditions. And yet, he was his late mother's little darling. I tried to bring him up to be a man as befitting his heritage, bought him the best tutors, and exposed him early to our life. Unfortunately, he hadn't shown any interest in that. Always more interested in wines and poets, never anything respectable. Nothing kept his attention for more than a season. And yet he was gregarious, full of life and vigor, out and about with his friends. Late last year, something changed. He became morose, secluding himself for days on end. At first I thought this was just another phase, as all his affairs of the heart were quick to pass. But soon his studies were affected. I arranged for him to travel to my brother on Gibros. I thought perhaps a bit of travel and sea air will improve his health. My brother Publius Quintus. I'm having a problem with these NCTs here. Quintius. Quintius promised to look after him and get his mind off from what was troubling him. He has a big country estate as well as many businesses there, and we hope to entice young Caesar out of his doldrums. I sent my friend's son, Gnaeus Drusus, with him. At first, this seemed to have worked. My brother had written to me that life amongst the Isles seemed to have done Caesar well, even if he was not interested in learning about the family business. They came back at the end of the shipping season and resumed their studies. However, over winter, his health seemed to deteriorate. He became pale and thin, wasting away. I called for the most renowned Magisteri Carneum, the best physicians money could buy, but he refused to see them and claimed that he needed no medicine. I then decided to send him on a sea voyage again, this time for an extended period. Getting a little... However, when I informed him of my decision yesterday, he became distraught. He absolutely refused. At first, he argued that he simply could not be away from Agricia, that I was sending him into exile, ostracizing him, and might as well just execute him. When I persisted, he became hysterical, frantic. He started to abuse me in the most offensive language. I had my steward confine him to his room. We could hear him railing and wailing for a while, and then he seemed to calm down. He stopped and took a deep breath, steeling himself. My steward was closing the house at midnight as usual. Being fond of Caesar, he went into his room to check on him. Caesar was not in his room, but my steward thought he merely sneaked out to find food. He searched for him and was about to call me when he saw Caesar come back from the street. He saw him proceed to his room and was satisfied that my son had regained his senses. However, in the morning, when he went to check on Caesar, he found him in his bed, dead, and upon his face a horrible grimace. His face. You will soon see that about him, which made me question the circumstances of his death, if for no other reason than to please the shade of his mother, my late wife. I would like to know how and why he died last night. Change. We walked together, Corpio himself leading us, with Typhius following behind me. We crossed the atrium, went through a short passage and entered a large open garden. We were headed towards the living and sleeping quarters, located at the back of the mansion. As we drew close, I glimpsed a loggia facing the ocean, with magnificent open vistas visible between the columns. No one knows yet, continued Corpio as we walked, besides the three of us and my steward. We kept the door locked and ordered the staff away. After the initial shock, Typhoeus recalled stories about you and your expertise in these matters. We stopped before a closed room, and even from this side my skin tingled and I could smell that telltale odor. The door was guarded by a short, bald man with a harried look, which Corpio introduced as his steward. He nodded at the man, who unlatched the door and opened it. "See for yourself," said Corpio. We left everything as we found it. I stepped into the room. The shutters were still closed, and morning light filtered through the cracks, its angled rays providing faint illumination. I could see a figure lying on a sumptuous sleeping couch and smell the voided bowels. I stepped closer. Seso was on his back, body straight, kept taut and rigid by rigor mortis. His arms by his side, and his backside lifted clear off the mattress. He appeared as if frozen in the middle of a spasm of pain. I looked at his face, and the impression was made stronger. His eyes screwed shut, nostrils flared, mouth in a rictus with baring clenched teeth. One could almost hear his teeth grinding in death. I have seen people die, some with terrifying spasms of pain. I have seen men die, and their bodies left to freeze in a fixed position in rigor mortis. Yet never have I seen someone die, and their whole body freeze in the middle of such a spasm. Under the smells of sweat, urine, and feces was the acrid sweet scent, which meant I had a serious paying job ahead of me. I walked to the window and opened the shutters. I heard a stifled cry behind me. I turned back to examine the body. Seso was about 18 years of age, a handsome fellow, shoulder-length, honey-colored hair, smooth skin, strong chin and cheekbones, long nose. A picture of health, were it not for the obviously painful death. I approached the bed and ran my fingers lightly along Seso's forearm. I could feel the goosebumps on his flesh, and the tingling that ran up my own skin became almost palpable. I knelt down beside him, and with my hand tried to gently pry open his eyes. The muscles of his face were screwed tight and refused to be moved. I tried the same with his mouth, but got no further. His teeth were clenched so tightly they showed hairline cracks. I drew back his light sleeping blanket and exposed his body. I heard the sharply drawn breaths behind me, and had trouble myself not to react. Seso was a young man with good physique. He was lying in front of us, naked, with a body held rigid and backside raised off the mattress. But that was not what caused the gasps. On his chest, above his heart, was a livid red-purple tattoo with the outline of a seven-point star. From it, spokes radiated along his ribs, enveloping his torso and keeping clear of his abdomen. I leaned closer and could see faint traces in blue that worked their way around the red lines, all of which extended down his sides and on to his pelvis and genitals, spiraling around his manhood. The acrid, sweet smell, the tingling touch, the tattoo. It was enough to confirm the general cause of death, but I needed more information, and this was the only opportunity I would have to gather it. I drew my knife from inside my tunic and looked back at Corpio. "May I?" He stared blankly at me. "I need to extract some samples. I will open his mouth and his eyes as I need to look into them. This will not be pretty. But I will not disfigure him. I have to ascertain certain things to be able to investigate his death." He turned even whiter than before, covered his mouth with a kerchief, and nodded faintly. "I may be able to reset his features," I added, to try to ease his pain. You should be able to hold him on the customary bier without much sign of the way he died." I turned back to the corpse. The easiest way would be to break his jaw. However, I had just promised his father to keep him presentable for a proper funeral. From my dagger's sheath, I pulled out a couple of very small and very thin blades. They were stored in special pockets in the side of the hard leather. I ran my finger along his jaws toward his ears, feeling the bunched muscles. At the point below the ear where the muscles terminated and attached to the bone, I placed one of the small blades at a sharp upwards angle and stuck it I placed one of the small blades at a sharp upward angle and stuck it gently with the hilt of my dagger. It slid in, and I could feel the ligaments rolling under the skin. His face acquired a lopsided expression, half relaxed and half rictus, like a person who suffered a stroke and went mad. I repeated this on the other side, and the whole jaw became relaxed. I unscrewed the back of my dagger's pommel and extracted a tightly wrapped parcel. I carefully unrolled it and took out a thin, sharp sliver of light-colored wood from amongst the contents. I pricked my finger with it and then chewed on its bloodied end. I braced myself against what I knew was coming and moved so that my back would hide the corpse's head from his father. Put my hands on his jaw with my thumbs and pressed his chin and forced his mouth open. I pulled the sliver of wood from between my teeth and poked it as deep as I could down the throat, bloodied end first. A noxious cloud of foul-smelling, thin black vapor escaped his teeth. I shut my eyes and held my breath, leaning back to avoid getting it in my face. I heard retching and retreated feet behind me. There was no mistaking the boiling, bubbling, melting sounds and the fetid smell of putrefied flesh as the wooden chip blackened when touching his esophagus. I hastily moved closer to the window and saw that Corpio was leaning weakly in the doorway. Typhoeus was on his knees in the garden, and the steward was gone. Corpio was doing better than I expected, I must say. Caesa's job now slack. I retrieved my thin blades and set to work on his eyes. These would be harder to relax without leaving more visible marks. We always look to people's eyes to connect with them, to feel their humanity. A person's eyes tell you so much about them, without a word crossing the gulf between the two of you. We fall in love with a look. Poets, far better than I, have scribbled many a verse on the subject. but what awaited me behind Seiso's eyelids when I finally lifted them up was decidedly not human. At first, all I could see was a yellowish ball. When I coaxed his eyes around to face the front, there was no trace of original irises, just a red hexagon lined in black. I let them roll back inward and let the eyelids to snap shut. Better that way. One last thing remained. I placed myself so the watchers would not see my next actions, as what I was about to do was nefas, sacrilege. I moved next to the corpse's torso and carefully cut the skin down from his solar plexus along the line of his ribs, trying hard not to cut across any of the red and blue markings on his chest. I did the same on the other side and ended up with a bloody red wedge on his abdomen pointing up at his sternum. I inserted the tip of my dagger under the skin at the top of the triangle and lifted it gently, then rolled the skin back to expose his inner organs. I set to work separating the layers of flesh and muscles. I reached inside, gingerly pushing my forearm halfway up to my elbow under his ribs, making my way down through the moist innards and up past his lungs before I felt the calcified mass where his heart should have been. I withdrew it, yanking and cutting gently with the knife where it's still connected to the flesh and veins. I could feel its hard facets as I grasped it tightly. At last I stood up and held out my hand, the light from the window reflecting in the blood covering my arm. In my hand was what had been Seiso's heart, and was now a large, heart-shaped ruby. I would pay for a lavish funeral if you could sell this, I said, but I doubt you would find a buyer. This is most definitely the product of necromancy. The end. Well, that's the end of the reading selection. I'm not sure if that's the end of chapter 1 or not, but that's the end of the reading selection. If you're interested in this novel, it's called Murder in Absentia by Assaph Mehr. The links for purchase, if you're interested in reading this novel, are available on my website. As I said, it's under the Night Reads link. The original promotional information, like the synopsis and the link for purchase, are currently up on the main page. Later on, it will be, those links will be moved to the episodes page. So if you enjoyed this, check it out. And this long pause will be cut from the edited version, of course. All right, well, our next episode will not be until April the 24th at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. That would be 6 p.m. Pacific. And we will be reading a novel called Chasing After Trouble, which is an adult mystery action adventure. It is written by T.M. DeLawrence. And this is actually somebody that I've met in person, a very cool guy. He writes kind of like a detective novel, mystery kind of, I believe that's what this is. And I'm sure he will correct me if I'm wrong if he sees this. And if he doesn't, then I guess no one will ever know because he didn't correct me. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and until next time, we will be doing other stuff. Good night.